Judah. We have maybe some crystal ball predictions from the kind, benevolent dictator.
I was looking around for the crystal ball.
They're in that white box over there. I could totally bust them out if you want me to. Do you want some headgear, some crystal ball, and some magic wands?
Well, we might need the magic wands more than the crystal ball.
That's true.
It'd be more reliable.
That's true. Both Quentin and I have some hair product in, so I think we're going to pass on the headgear.
This is true.
Is that a fair assumption there?
That's a safe assumption.
That's a safe assumption. There we go. So give the show a like and a share. We'll rock and roll and offer some perspective for you guys on Real Talk here, a 2023 version of Real Talk. We will get to a question that's already been posted on the feed prior to starting from the promo post we did with QB on the program. Live on all social channels out there. And Quentin's friends and familia and network on the feed. Richard O'Brien, giving the man some props. Little props as well from Todd Jenkins. J-Dubs, we can rock and roll when you're ready, my friend. And make sure we're going to QB's page, Facebook page. Oh, you are getting that.
See if I can manage this without breaking it.
Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk with Keith Smith. Thank you kindly for joining us. A pleasure to connect with you guys through Real Talk and the I Love Seville Network, thanks to the good people at Keller Williams Alliance, the good people at Closure Title and Settlement Company, who have swag on the set right here. Quentin Beckham is in the house. He is an inner circle friend, an all-around A-plus guy, and someone who has a lot to say about a lot of things. So he is a talk show host's dream in a lot of ways, because I don't have to pull things out of him. Not saying I have to with other folks, but perhaps I do. Judah Wickower is our director. This show is dynamic, where you, the viewer and listener, can offer perspective and ask questions and shape where the show goes. So join us with the discussion and share some thoughts and perspective in the feed. Judah Wickower is A-plus people as well. If you could go to the studio camera, and then we'll get Quentin Beckham in the house on a Friday morning. My friend, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great.
It's 2023.
I know. How was your holiday?
It was good. I got sick, as did most everybody. So I had 4 or 5 days sort of being a couch potato and doing very little.
How did you manage the sickness?
You know, it manages you. You get tired, you fall asleep, you wake up, you do some things, you lay back on the sofa thinking, I'm just going to watch a little TV. And then you wake up and it's 2 p.m. and you're like, wow, I guess I should do dishes or laundry or something.
Is Quentin Beckham binging any kind of shows that we should know about?
Oh, gosh. So there's actually 2 shows I watch when I'm sick.
Okay.
And I watch them repetitively because I can fall asleep and wake up and know exactly where I'm at.
Okay.
And it's the entire Planet Earth series.
Okay.
Because I think it's fun to see the animals in all the different places. And way back in time, there was a Science Channel show called How It's Made.
Okay.
Because it helps me increase my knowledge of useless trivia that I can then pull out at a moment's notice.
Will we see any of that useless trivia today on the talk show?
You never know. Let's hope it's not all useless. But yeah, you might.
Kevin Yancey says good morning to Quentin Beckham. Questions, as I've said, have come in prior to the show. Lisa Costello, welcome to the program. Lisa, we very much appreciate the support and the kind words you offer us on social media. All right, the first question that came in before the program even started was on inventory and how do we get more of it. So why don't we start with that one, and then we can springboard into any other discussion. Inventory is low.
Inventory is low, and you know, if you're saying how do we get more of it in terms of short term, we're already seeing some come on the market. Inventory is growing, although that's more a result of an increased days on market, taking longer to sell. And you'll see our usual spring uptick in whatever fashion it's going to be this year. In terms of how we fix inventory, we need more construction. I know that sounds like I've been trumpeting that horn for 2 years, and that's only because it's been right and true for 2 years. And even before then, if you think back to when the market crashed, which is not what's happening now, but when you think back to when the market crashed, there was so much excess stock. There was a lot of homes that went into foreclosure. There were a lot of homes that got purchased as bad investments that never were occupied, and that made a glut of inventory, and that's when we saw that 24% price correction from back then. That's not going to happen now. So if you're thinking we're going to get inventory from changing economics or the recession, probably not to the degree that you believe you're going to get. If you go back in time, about 35% of all of the mortgages back when the market crashed were adjustable rate mortgages, so they were particularly susceptible to changes in the Fed rate and in the overall economics. And today that number is only 10%. In addition, we just got a really good jobs report, much to everybody's chagrin. They kind of was hoping it was not as good as they thought it was.
We actually want people to get laid off. Well, we don't personally. The Fed does.
The Fed actually would like to see that come down a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's staying nice and steady and even. And so if you think about what's coming ahead, we still have increases in wages. There were a lot of new increases in minimum wage that just went into effect. And so you're seeing more income in the middle and lower income brackets, which is good. And we're seeing steady job availability. So I think the last time I looked, this number might be a few days old, there were 1.7 jobs available for every person that was looking. So there are jobs out there. And although we are seeing layoffs happen, they're happening in companies that never had the pandemic layoffs or maybe had pandemic hiring versus job growth, which is still happening in all of the places that saw a lot of job loss.
Quinn Beckham, our friend Leah Elberson is watching. That was a great first take. Leah Elberson has this to say. And oftentimes, Lee Elberson is joining us in studio when QB is here as well. He says he's tremendously bummed not to be in studio with QB and me this morning, but he's going to be tuning in. And he said, I remember how it's made. I love that show. Oh, I'll ask a trivia question for Quentin regarding how it's made here very shortly. So why don't we give our friend Lee Elberson some props.
So I did ask Lee if he could join me today. I did ask him at the 11th hour because honestly, time just got away from me and I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be on the show tomorrow. I wonder if I could have company.
And did he have something going on? Maybe a tutoring session with Claiborne Education?
You know, apparently he has a job.
He has a job?
He has a job other than just satisfying my needs for poker and drinking buddies and that sort of thing. And really importantly is he's researching cars.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I'm sorry if I'm talking out of school. He's researching cars and we may go drive some cars together this weekend.
Lee Elberson, is it going to be a new Jeep?
I don't know what it's going to be. I think there's...
Because he's a Jeep guy.
It would not surprise me if there is the car that he wants and that is different from the car Alex wants.
Okay, so Alex is getting what she wants then. That's Lee's beautiful wife. Well, okay, all right. Lee, join us in the conversation, my friend. Vanessa Parkhill, the Queen of Earlysville, is watching. Joyce Parks finds you absolutely hilarious and gave you the laugh emoji right there. Bill McChesney, the mayor of McIntyre, tuning into the program. All right, we'll ask this question for you. How do you characterize the economy right now?
Complicated.
Okay. I respect that.
You know, typically speaking, when we've seen recessions, they have hit middle and lower income families harder than they've hit the upper 20% of the income bracket. And so what you saw is minimal losses and oftentimes gains in the upper 20%, hence some of the income inequality that we're seeing here, while as the middle 25 and the lower 25 saw the brunt of it. And so far, all of the numbers we're seeing is the opposite. You're getting much more of what they're terming on the news outlets as a rich session, meaning that most of the economic losses are happening in the upper 20-25% of the income brackets, and not so much in that middle 25, lower 25, again, owing to the jobs report that we're just talking about. So if you read the news about all the layoffs and you think, oh my gosh, there's a ton of layoffs. Yeah, there's some layoffs, yes. But these are also in the $175,000 to $250,000 income bracket. So these are professionals at tech companies and mortgage brokers and others that have been traditionally, solidly upper middle class to upper middle class plus, whereas your average working class person is seeing more jobs available for them than they can have. And so we're seeing this hit really the upper brackets. And I don't know that we will see anything dramatic unless it happens from some outside circumstance. Most of the economics feel really solid. I think we will probably get told at some point that we've been in a recession for a while, and they'll look in the rearview mirror and say, oh yeah, that was the recession. But we have a lot of positives happening in the global economic market that we should see, impacting us here locally. And we've got good stuff happening locally as well. I don't quite know how all of the localities have decided to spend their excess budgets yet. I'm still pondering that. I have a lot of my own opinions on it.
Well, I was going to ask you of your opinion. Charlottesville City in particular, what is it, roughly $28 million ballpark of surplus funds?
It is.
That's a boatload. We're talking over 10% of the budget here.
It is.
Total budget.
It is. And when you think of particularly households that are in that middle to lower income bracket that have been hit with taxes, there's a big opportunity. There's also probably a need to use some of that money to accelerate filling open positions in the city employment structure. We have a lot of openings that are stalling other good things that are happening. Maybe some hiring bonuses are in order to attract that talent. We are still in a job market where there is competition for good employees. And so if we could maybe ease some of the burden of people moving into the new year, as well as fill some of these open slots so that, we have inspectors to get certificates of occupancy for home construction and all of the people that make the city run. Those might be good things. I'm sure Brian Pinkston has a plan for some of this. I know one of his goals in the coming year is to focus on budget and the open positions. I have not paid attention to what other people are saying. I just happen to know Brian from a long time ago, and so I have seen some of his commentary online.
You are bringing your A-plus game.
I'm completely unprepared. I was
Doesn't
running
look
late
like
this
it.
morning. I walked in 10 minutes before this started. I am having coffee out of my closure, title, and settlement. Excellent.
Look at that.
Excellent thermos.
The
here.
man is a professional broadcaster
It
with the
keeps-
partner name drop right there.
Isn't that amazing? It keeps hot things hot and cold things cold, but how does it know?
This is so good here. All right, Bill, we'll get to your comments here. Grayson, we'll get to your comments as well. I got a follow-up for Quentin Beckham. The trivia question has just come in via LinkedIn from Lee Elberson, which I'll get to in a matter of moments here. The show is in fuego right now. How do you characterize the economy locally? You gave us a macro national analysis. How about in Charlottesville and Central Virginia?
We're seeing...
Because he owns a lot of companies. Very humbly and very down low and very behind the scenes, this guy is a major player, in a lot of different spaces of business.
exaggerates.
How many companies do you own?
He exaggerates.
I'm not exaggerating. I really do know this.
So I think what we're seeing here is sort of the yin and yang. So we still have some issues to deal with, but we've had a lot of return to retail growth. We're having people going to restaurants again. Those restaurants and those stores are hiring and seeking to hire. We're still seeing small businesses go out of business, but the pace has slowed down, and a lot of the tried and true ones are seeing a pickup and a return to a more normal sort of retail experience. In addition, we're having the same positive employment circumstances where there are more jobs out there than we have employees for, and this is good. We want that middle class bracket to be propped up. You've heard me say it before, and it's still true. 65 to 70% of the American economy, and this includes our local economy, is retail. It's middle class people who can be consumers. If you make $500,000 a year, you still only need so many pairs of jeans. I might buy a really expensive car, but I only buy one. And what we really need is we need all of the middle class to be able to participate in the local economy, in retail and in service industry, And that is what drives all of our economy for taxes and growth and opportunity.
Does the restaurant closings concern you? There have been a lot of them.
We've always had such an excess per capita of restaurants that although I wish they hadn't closed, it does not surprise me because we would think of those as being a fragile investment in this town. And honestly, most restaurants don't make it past year number 3 anyway. And we've probably experienced sort of the 20-year sweet spot of having lots of restaurant growth and lots of restaurants available and lots of people using them. And what we're doing now is moving into a more normal environment like other cities have, where you can't have 105 restaurants per capita, per 1,000 people, because that's not enough people to support them. And even though we've moved out of the pandemic restrictions and we do have people going out, there's a lot more, anecdotally, people are being a lot more conservative about how they're spending their money and where they're going. And they settled in and bought homes where they could be at home more, and they're doing that. And that's probably a good thing for most families to do while we figure out what's going to happen in the next quarter to 6 months.
Nikki Chambliss, giving you props.
Hey, Nikki.
Nikki, Happy New Year. Let's see here. You're getting a lot of props from a lot of people. You're getting props as well from Leslie Frazier.
Leslie.
Stephen, we will get to your comments here in a matter of moments. Before we do, let me get to this one from Grayson. Does Quinton have concern for the folks that purchased far from Charlottesville City, and as Jerry says, the place or epicenter of employment and the real estate values potentially dropping in the outer county areas?
So that's really 3 questions. So the first question is, if you purchased a house that was far away because your job was portable and you could work from home, what are the odds of that changing? And the odds are probably 50-50. The return to office, the return to work movement has gained some speed.
Definitely.
And people are really feeling that. But there's also a lot of opportunity in small businesses and in larger ones to really realize financial gains by allowing people to continue to work from home. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, and I think it depends on what job you had, what was the agreement, and how did you move to home work, and what does that work from home look like for you? So there's opportunity for that to change. And if so, and you're too far away, what's that going to look like? The salient piece of that being, is it office 5 days a week or is it 2 days a week? If you were able to work successfully from home during the pandemic, what's changing now? And is that motivated by your employer or is that motivated by you? Because there's still every study in the world that says remote work reduces your chance of advancement. So I think it depends on where you're at in that. The second question in that was...
I agree with that.
The second question in that was, let's suppose they have to move. Are they going to be able to sell their home at an adequate value, or are they going to be underwater? And the vast majority of homes are not underwater. And if they are, they're not underwater by much. So if you think back to people, I think we've got this sort of reflex, and I'm sure Leslie has people around her that could tell me even more about it. We have this sort of reflex from when the market crashed, where within the space of 90 days, people were $35,000, $45,000, $85,000, $100,000 underwater and out of work, and in an adjustable rate mortgage where their payment was going up. We're not seeing that perfect storm of short sale and foreclosure opportunity because people do have jobs, they're not out of work, they're not in adjustable rate mortgages, and we don't have this enormous crash. So if you're looking at the 90-day data, housing prices on average across the nation, and I don't have it here locally, are down 2 to 4%. 2 to 4% can be a lot if you bought a $500,000 home, but it's still 2 to 4% down based on being 34% higher than it was in 2020. So really there's this sort of bell curve of, did I buy at the top of the market and I'm going to get screwed? That was a really sharp peak, Mount Everest style, when the market crashed, and we're seeing a much gentler bell curve in this. We don't have prices dropping out left and right now. So we've talked about inventory, and we started the show with how do we get more inventory, meaning, hey, people really want to buy houses and they don't have any choices. That also means that that's propping up some of the prices. It's giving a strong value to the houses that do come on the market. But because of the reduced buyer activity and the higher mortgage rates, sellers are having to do some negotiating, and there's a lot more seller concession. If you look in the last quarter of data from across the country, 41% of homes that sold had some sort of seller concession. And that is the highest ever, I believe, from the time that data has been tracked. That usually runs somewhere in the 28 to 35% range over the last decade. So it's a lot more sellers that are realizing that to move their home in this market, they have to make it attractive. They have to put some window dressing on it. But they still have a very strong value because how many homes are on? We're starting to see some of our early markets, it's still winter, but we're seeing some of our early market homes come on in the local area. You're seeing several new listings come on in Charlottesville and around the county. Good, solid listings that are not enormously expensive in comparison to what we've been through the last 2 years. And so I think as we go through all of that, there's a lot of opportunity for people that maybe made a pandemic choice to either make that choice continue to be valuable for them or move that forward in a way that is successful and lets them continue to work where they're employed and maybe move closer. The trick here being putting your house on the market doesn't mean you have 5 options for what to buy if you're wanting to stay in Central Virginia necessarily. And so if you have moved out of town and you're experiencing problems, find a trusted real estate agent and a counselor, and let's talk through that.
Let's give Neil Williamson some props. The president of the Free Enterprise Forum watching the program here.
I do love me some Neil.
So do I. If I'm going to belly up to a bar, I'd like Beckham on one side and Williamson on the other side over there, and the conversation would be free-flowing. Jason Howard, we'll get to your question here on leases, and it's a good one because this man does a lot of commercial and business brokerage, and he's a well-connected individual. Before we get to this question, Jason Howard, I have a question for the benevolent dictator himself. Has it shifted yet to a buyer's market?
No.
So we're not in a shift yet?
No.
Is it a balanced market, or is it still a seller's market?
But remember, when you're a small orphan child living on the street, even a bad foster home feels good. And so, the pendulum is swinging back towards the middle, but it's not there yet.
So it's a seller's market?
It is still a seller's market.
Wow, okay.
But all of the economics are changing, and I think some of the old ways that we think about it and the old terms that we use are not effective anymore.
Okay.
Because they're too
What's that mean?
It means we've bumped the Fed rate by a lot in a short period of time, and we still have a strong jobs report. That lever is not working as predicted. So we're still seeing consumers spend money. And yes, some of that is from savings, but it hasn't backed off. And the whole point of what the Fed was doing was to pump the brakes, slow down the spending, which should, in theory, slow down the number of jobs available, which should, in theory, slow down the wage increases and cool the economy. And none of that's happened. And so I think using that as a bellwether, some of those same things apply to the housing market we're in. So we used to say 6 months of inventory was the balance between buyers and sellers, but that 6 months was based on a consistent number of buyers being out there, and maybe 6 months isn't the line anymore. Maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 4 months, maybe it depends on a price point, maybe it depends on the kind of house that you're selling. So it is still a seller's market in terms of the fact that there are not enough homes on the market to really overwhelm the number of buyers that are out there. Think of it like the jobs report. 1.7 jobs per person looking for work. Maybe there's 1.7 buyers per house on the market, 2 buyers per house. And that is more telling for what kind of deal you're going to get than this months of inventory equation. Eventually the months of inventory will catch up, but if you're talking and needing to sell a house in the next 6 months, it may not get there to where your reality is matching the numbers. So I would encourage people to not think that that's the end-all be-all. On the other hand, sellers that need to sell, and they need a place to go, and they need some flexibility with that, and that's going to cost them some money. What's good for sellers right now, and the reason I'm saying it's still a seller's market, being a seller's market doesn't mean the buyer has to lose. Being a seller's market means sellers can get what they need to move on to the next place without losing their shirt, or living in a hotel, or otherwise experiencing, enforced van life for a month. So if you are a seller now, because you're still on the tail end of that 30% increase from 2 years ago, because you probably didn't buy last year and are turning around and looking to buy unless you've got circumstances that are forcing you, you're still on the tail end of this 30% increase. So you have opportunities to offer concessions that will attract the buyers because you don't have many of them, make the house look great, and really move forward in a way that still gets you most of that increase, still provides you some flexibility to get from point A to point B and where you need to be, and remove some of the uncertainty. That's a seller's market. It's also a better buyer's market because they're now in the same position of being able to get what they need in order to make that sale happen. And that could be a 2-1 buy down that we've talked about. It could be paying points. It could be having seller concessions that are making repairs to a house that would otherwise not be able to be done because you're spending all your cash on a down payment. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. And don't forget that there's still a portion of the population out there that doesn't need a mortgage to buy a house. And so there's going to be some of those as well.
The mayor of McIntyre, a little bit more bearish on the local economy. He says this: the recent loss of local mid-jobs and food service employment is a good indication of a recession in Central Virginia. He's likely highlighting the 206 jobs that are lost at Custom Ink with the closure of that production facility. And with the food service employment, he's highlighting the Piedmont on Pantops, which is shut down. A lot of the Champion Hospitality Group brands have shut down. Our friend Curtis Shaver, his restaurant Peloton Station is shut down. So he is a little bit more bearish on the local outlook for the economy. Your thoughts on that? And then we'll go Jason Howard next, and then a trivia question from Lee Elberson on deck.
I understand that, and I don't feel like we're suddenly going to be rolling in wealth and tax dollars, but we still have a lower unemployment than the national average in Virginia.
It's true.
And Charlottesville has a lower unemployment than the surrounding counties inside of Virginia. So maybe maybe it's still a matter of, what's the least worst food available, or what's the least worst scenario. In the terms of how the overall economy looks, doing well often means doing better than the next guy. And I still think we're set up to do pretty well in the year to come. There's nothing that seems to have changed. Is there a lot of opportunity for things to go sour? Sure, there is. There's a lot of stuff happening globally that is bad. And there is an opportunity for consumers to really pull back from the service economy that supports a lot of our income. So do I want people to run out and spend a bunch of money and use up their savings? No. You should be conservative, make a budget, live by your budget. Don't overspend, don't overreach, unless you're looking to buy a new car over the weekend, in which case you should totally go do it, Lee. But I don't feel like there's an imminent crash. I think we've been through the worst of it in terms of that. And remember that in terms of job growth, and this is true nationally as well as locally, we're still adding jobs to the service industry, hospitality, retail, all the places that really dramatically lost them when the pandemic happened. So maybe we're just noticing it more, but we're still on an upward trend despite all of those losses that make us really kind of nervous about the state of affairs for those people.
Mustache Dan Pettit of Real Estate 3 says, I'm thankful for Quentin Beckham and Sir Neil Williamson. They constantly keep us up to date with current updates. He also says, good morning. I will get to DP's comments here in a matter of moments. I've promised Jason Howard we will get to his. He says this, and Jason Howard's the king of Rio. Quentin Beckham, do you see more restaurant closures as long-term leases run out and it doesn't make sense to renew with the oversaturation you spoke of, plus a tighter labor market for staff?
It is harder to hire staff and it costs more money. And if you look at our commercial space across, we're seeing a lot of price reductions in commercial space because they're having a hard time filling it and there's a lot of vacancy. There are probably restaurateurs and other small businesses that are in commercial leases that don't make sense, where it makes sense for them to either shut down or cut the lease and move, which in the restaurant business is shutting down and coming up somewhere else under a new name. So I think we're going to see more places move around to make the economics work and to take advantage of the positives that we're seeing amongst that. I don't know that for every couple of restaurants I've heard of closing, there's been at least one that is then reopening or being reimagined. But we've had a glut of restaurants for the population that we've had for a long time, and we just may be coming back down to where the rest of the country is.
The follow-up question for that on a different Facebook page from Kelsey, what is the future of restaurants, Quinton?
What is the future of restaurants?
I
The
would
same
say
thing. The same
Smaller
thing.
footprint, maybe automated,
Oh gosh.
less staff.
I hope it's not automated. We go through this a lot in different industries where we're like, what's the future of this? What's the future of real estate? And I'm going to use real estate as an example because that's what I'm supposed to be talking about, although I seem to talk about everything else.
That's why we like you.
Has real estate changed versus 30 years ago? Sure it has. We now have listings on this instead of in a big notebook. You now find me on the internet and we can talk on Zoom instead of you coming to the office. So if you think of the days when you came to the office, you wanted the office to look good, you want to be greeted by somebody that was personable with a smile and maybe offered a cup of coffee and taken care of, and we called that customer service. It's still customer service that is connecting realtors and clients today. The fact that where it happens moved doesn't change that fact. So with restaurants, I think you're going to see the same things. A lot of the restaurants that are thriving in place under the traditional model that we think of with really great service and really great food. And so you're going to need those things. And many of the restaurants that are thriving have the same staff. You walk in and you recognize people and they know your name. And so
I love that stuff.
Folks that have always had a great model are going to continue and they're going to be fine. And it's folks that are trying to outlive their price per plate by too far that might be having a problem. So if you go to a restaurant, it's good food, it's good service, odds are they're going to continue. Support them, go out when you can, take your family out, and have a budget and live within your budget. We often worry about this excessively. And the market will determine who survives, and it will do it in Darwinian fashion to meet the needs. I'm curious to see some of the places that we have, some of the retail and commercial spots that we have that have in some ways maybe pushed small businesses out of business because of how they charge and how they lease. I would love to see them chill out on that a bit. And
You're saying they're asking too much rent. Is that what you're saying?
In short version, yes.
Okay.
And didn't participate well with clients in the pandemic shutdown. And so there was opportunity for large property owners to help clients through and access federal money, and not everybody did that. And I think we're going to see those people lose space for lease. As more space comes for lease, it should push the price down, and I hope that actually happens. And that will provide opportunity for more of the restaurants to come back.
You see commercial rents potentially dropping around here?
I think commercial rents are already down in comparison. There's been a lot of space available. It may not always be the space businesses are looking for, but there's quite a bit of commercial space available at really reasonable rates. Find a good commercial agent if you're looking for it. Really make sure it meets your needs, because price per square foot isn't always the overarching question for a commercial lease, but there's more opportunity to be in more spaces than there was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Kevin, Yancey, we'll get to your comments here. I've promised Lee Elberson we'll get to his on LinkedIn. And viewers and listeners, you can shape the discussion by offering your thoughts in the comment section, and we will read it live on air. Lee Elberson, CEO of Claiborne, says, Quinton brings up a salient point. We let ourselves focus on micro trends, and sometimes we lose track of the big picture items like the long-term growth we are seeing. He also wants to get your take on dairy market.
That's a very broad question. Could we narrow that down?
Lee, I know Lee, and we've had conversations about Dairy Market in the past, so I'm going to see if I can paraphrase for him, unless, Lee, you want to offer more specifics that you want from Quentin. Here's essentially what he is asking, I believe. What is your take on the long-term potential of Dairy Market and the success some of the merchants may be having or may not be having in Dairy Market? And is Dairy Market impacting locations like, say, the downtown mall? There's a few questions in that one.
Dairy Market has really great potential for a particular niche. And I'm not so sure that they haven't overestimated that niche.
Ooh, what does that mean?
So who's most likely to have food and drink at Dairy Market?
Well, I think people like you and I, and or students.
And or students.
Yeah.
You know, Dairy Market gets...
It's not cheap.
It gets characterized a lot as an upscale food court.
I'd say that's a fair description.
You can walk in
Elevated
and
food court?
There's ice cream, there's a nice bar, there's a variety of places. There's a big restaurant off to the side, and there's some retail. And it just feels less accessible to people than a lot of other places I've seen. So if all of this, if the office space above and behind, if the apartments behind, if everything fills up where this then becomes easy walking distance and the price points remain reasonable, I think they've got a really good chance to do well. They had the misfortune of having the worst timing in terms of opening
Right at
for
COVID.
what happened economically. And so I don't know that anybody really knows what Dairy Market can and can't do. And we may be figuring that out over the next year.
I think you've touched on this. He says, what does Quentin think Dairy Market's restaurant vendors will look like in the next year? And we will stipulate this. Both QB and I patronize Dairy Market. We enjoy the cocktails at the Milkman Bar. I love the beer at Star Hill. I love Dino. For those that don't know, it is expensive to rent a stall at Dairy Market.
It's a lot of money, yeah.
It's a lot of money. What do you think the vendors will look like in the next year at DM from Elberson?
You know, that's hard to say. I think when you look at, I'm trying to think of a good way to say this. When I was in California, one of my favorite teenage restaurants was Wiener Schnitzel.
Okay.
They had the best chili cheese dogs a teenager could want. And you paid 99 cents for 3 chili cheese dogs, and your expectation of the food quality was mitigated by the 99 cents. This was very different from than if you went to a place in LA like Ruth Chris or Patina or one of the places where it was $150 a plate. Your expectations changed. There is a potential for a mismatch between Dairy Market's rent expectations and the vendors that are in there and their client expectations. So if you are in Dairy Market selling ice cream, what does that scoop of ice cream have to cost to make that price per square foot work out for that vendor so that they stay viable? I think Stonefield has seen some similar issues. We know several restaurants that have struggled there, that have closed, that have switched hands repetitively, because renting commercial space is really just investing in an income per square foot. And if you can't make that income higher than the lease rate, you're screwed. We have a lot of really reasonably priced vendors in there that are doing great food and great service. And they're in a space that, although they're small because they've got the shared space, they're all paying a high per square foot price.
100%.
So they need a huge volume of people. And I think the biggest trick with Dairy Market is getting that volume moving through that middle space every day, day in and day out, and month by month. And I'm sure Angelique and some others that are in there would give you a better perspective on this, on what needs to happen for them for that to be viable, because otherwise they have to raise their price. And you know, we're still adjusting to restaurants needing to pay more because they're having to take better care of their folks, because minimum wage has gone up, and because their needs post-pandemic and during the pandemic got raised as well. So if we're not willing to do that, that's going to become a challenge for a lot of folks that are in the dairy market model. And if we're not willing to do that and the volume doesn't pick up, that's going to be a challenge as well. If you move enough people through that space every day that buy lunch and dinner, they'll be fine. I don't see that many people in there when I've been in there.
I agree.
And so
I agree.
I think that is one of Dairy Market's challenges. It's not really the vendors, it's not the food, it's not the quality, and it's not the price. It's the sheer volume of customers that are moving through.
That's a great take. Beckham's on fire today. Give Beckham some props. Neil Williamson says this. Rents declining at fastest monthly pace in 7 years, and a new article from the National Apartment Association which references Zillow's observed rent index. The team in Arlington details a historic cooling of rents on a monthly basis. The decline hits more affluent rental markets like San Diego and New York City most potently, but this is important data to note as the supply shortage in rental housing has been putting more and more pressure on rents nationwide over the course of the past 2 years. Residential rents and commercial rents declining. What does that indicate to you as a KPI, Quentin Beckham?
I mean, what did we expect? House prices are coming down as well. And remember, everything's about supply and demand. If you price yourself so high that nobody can afford you, you fail. You know, one of my favorite lines when I'm trying to talk to agents about dealing and working well with their sellers is a house that doesn't sell is worth nothing. You have to price appropriately for the market that you're in, and that includes retail, it includes commercial, it includes industrial, it includes residential. We all have to price appropriately for the economy that we're in, and I think we're just having a hard time deciding what that is because the economy has changed so dramatically and so quickly, and we keep trying to relate it to things from our past, but this is something new. And so we're having to price things month by month and in 6-month increments. If you met with an agent and they gave you a price for your house to sell 60 days ago, that's probably not the right price right now. And you're going to have to go through it again and get the new price, which could be higher, could be lower, depends on your individual circumstances. It's changing very, very quickly. And so I would encourage people to resist the generalizations that sort of make their decision for a year. Lower those time frames. You know, look, you want to plan far ahead, but when you're making decisions, look in the short term about what's happening right around because there's a lot of opportunity there.
Elena Mangione says props to QB.
Oh,
and all
Elena.
Caps. We love Elena Mangione. Meredith Young is watching.
Hey, Meredith.
Meredith, one of Keller Williams Alliance's finest realtors.
She's amazing.
She says, young families go to Dairy Market. We love taking our family there for pizza, brews, conversation, and ice cream. It's an easy weekend night out. We do very similar adventures as well with our boys, Meredith. I concur that that's a fantastic place for families. Kevin Yancey, King of Waynesboro, says, as Zip at Vivace told me years ago, you have to make your place a destination. You do not see Aberdeen Barn struggling, and you do not see Tip Top struggling. They are destination restaurants. We appreciate that from Kevin Yancey. This has come in from Ray Cadell, another fantastic agent.
Ray.
He says, my office staff and I have lunch takeout 4 times a week minimum. Dairy Market is just not worth it to us with the parking and the hassle that comes with it. Maybe a takeout only parking situation would help. It's popped up during COVID, particularly on 29 North. The parking takeout.
Yeah, I agree with Ray.
Go ahead.
If you're going to park there and you're paying for parking,
the first hour is free. If you do it at Dairy Market, the first hour is free.
Correct. By the time you go in, order, eat, and come out, is it going to be an hour?
It's going to be more than an hour.
Okay.
You're probably looking at, what would you say? If you're having a lunch.
Unless you're walking in, picking up a bag, and walking away.
Yeah. Probably looking at 90 minutes if you're having a sandwich, a lunch there.
I do believe they have the curbside pickup.
They do.
But that's still a bit from the door.
Yeah.
and the way the street is structured, it's not hugely convenient. Although it's possible, and none of that is Dairy Market's fault.
No.
I still go back to, you're renting the square footage, and you've got to be making more money than what that rent is. You've got to be making enough money to pay staff. You've got to be making enough money to buy increasingly expensive food. It needs a high volume flowing through it to support the number of businesses that are in there that are really service industry businesses, and these services have taken a big hit. I agree with a lot of stuff we're seeing online. It has to be a destination. There has to be a thing that brings you back other than just the food. Food can be great, but if you get a bad service experience, the best food in the world won't overcome it. If you get a bad food experience, you might go back again, but you won't overcome that. You really have to do the magic that makes a great service experience in a place that feels comfortable, that you recognize, where people know you, that also has good service.
He's on fire today. And Elena's giving you some props as well, Judah Wickhauer. Thank you. Elena Mangione, you and Bert are just A+ people. I love when you watch the program. I love them as well. Bill McChesney says, I noticed one of the Dairy Market vendors is selling their food trailer. That's a reference to Angelique. Angelique is selling her food trailer now. I noticed that on Facebook as well. Neil says, this is a great question for Quentin. Restaurants are a great topic for Quentin because Quentin enjoys restaurants quite a bit. Katie Pearl, I'll get to your question here in a matter of moments. Neil Williamson, the king of content, says this. What is QB? I love that you're just known as QB now. What is QB's take on the Piedmont closing on Pantops? Is that location jinxed? He asks. Did you hear about the closing?
Yeah. I would ask people that live around Pantops
I live
that
in that
question
area. Yeah.
because
You don't go that way.
not often. No.
Yeah.
No, it's I will go past it, but it feels like a lot of the people that are local to the restaurants there don't support those restaurants. They drive elsewhere.
That's Judah's point.
And so, ask people in those neighborhoods. I also think there's a mismatch from some of the housing that's close by and the restaurants that exist, and so that demographic may be worth looking at to
What
make
does that
sure.
mean?
So the restaurants are two things. A really successful restaurant, like a lot of service industries, is two things. One, it's a destination. I want to feel good about going there. We talk all the time about when you put a home on the market, I want the curb appeal, the front door and the porch to be amazing. I don't want a crappy door handle. I don't want people to struggle to get the key in and unlock the door, because the minute you walk in, that first blush is starting to define your whole experience.
Definitely.
So if it's hard to park, if I'm walking 40 feet uncovered in rain and cold,
Yep.
if I'm walking up steps that have not been properly salted and had the ice removed, if I'm struggling to get through a door, these all begin to affect my entire experience in the destination of the restaurant. So there's got to be some sort of matchup to that entire thing. If you think of good service experiences, it's helping somebody live in a story where they already know the ending.
Ooh, well said.
The reason everybody hated Game of Thrones is it wasn't the ending they wanted. We wanted it to live out our own personal fantasies. If you are telling a story in a service experience where people don't get the ending that they're expected, and it's not even about whether that's reasonable or not. When you walk into a restaurant that you really enjoy, it's because you know what's going to happen when you walk in. You know the faces and the names. Aberdeen Barn was brought up, and I love Angela, and I love the staff there.
I love Angela,
walk
too.
in, and I know exactly what to expect, and they know me, and they take good care of me, and it ends up how I expected. We don't want surprises. When I go to Tavola, same thing. Matchbox, same thing. If you look at people that do restaurants a lot over and over and over, they sit at the same tables. They sit in the same spots. They have their favorite dish, and they try to try new things, but they go back to their favorite dish. You're creating a whole story around this experience, and you have to have great service, and you have to have great food, but you also have to have an ending that everybody expects. And so anytime you deviate from that story, whether it's bad parking, whether it's parking you pay for, whether it's a delay, you start to lose clientele. I think the issue in Pantops has been a mismatch between the story that the clientele are expecting and the one that they're actually getting.
Dude's on fire today. Katie Pearl, KTP, the queen of...
I love Katie.
Oh, KTP's the best, the queen of Whitehall. She's got a moniker. She says, I agree that the process of driving there, parking, and getting the strollers out of the car at Dairy Market and walking in just feels like a little bit of a hassle unless I literally have nothing else to do that day. That's KTP. This comment's come in, and this is an interesting one. Does Quentin expect the number of active real estate agents in the Charlottesville-Albemarle area to increase or decrease in 2023?
Oh, that's an easy one. I think it's going to go down. I think across the country it's going to go down, and I think in Virginia it's going to go down, and in Charlottesville it's going to go down, much as the way when the market was accelerating, I would have told you it was going to go up. It's just a very common economic dynamic that the number of licensed realtors expands and contracts to match the market. We're seeing the number of sales go down. I don't think that means it's a crash, but we've been living in this really accelerated market where we've attracted a lot of people in, and not everybody's going to continue because it doesn't work for them. And that's okay. That's what's supposed to happen. So I would expect the number of agents to go down. I would also tell you, don't expect it to be the agent that's been in it for 10 or 20 years. You know, these are usually newcomers. We'll have some retirements, folks that have retired. Ginger Slavic just retired. Love Ginger. Gonna miss her. She retired, moved down south. I have an open invite to go visit her in Florida, and I might take her up on it. But the folks that have been in it for a long time have every opportunity to continue to be in it because, again, it's about that story and that service experience and who's going to come back to them.
Very well said. A lot has come in. We're trying to get to as many here as possible, guys. Bay Runner, we'll get to your comment here very shortly. Ray Cadell says the Thai Noodle House on Commonwealth Drive is a lot easier than Chim Street and DM or even Chim at 5th Street, so that's where we go. Same owners, of course. The Thai Noodle House is the one behind Stonefield, and it's absolutely fantastic. I completely agree with him there. This question's come in, and I think I know the answer to this. Can we expect new construction to finally happen, Quentin Beckham, this coming year or early into 2024?
Oh, gosh. So Neil wrote a really great article that was published in the Daily Progress, I think.
It was an
Neil,
op-ed. Yeah.
About local government leadership trying to plan in the real world as opposed to the pretend world. And, it depends on so many things. But the first thing it depends on is, do we make it possible? You know, if you want to have a really great show, you have to have a stage, and somebody's got to set the stage. And right now we have a very small stage that's not set very well. And so if we could have a bigger stage that was set better, you would have more opportunity for developers and private investment to come in and create the construction for new homes that we all really need. And right now, that's just not a stage that's set very well. It may not be the fault of the people that are currently in those elected positions, but it's still their responsibility to try and fix it. And zoning, the amount of land set aside for development, and the spaces set aside for development are a big deal. And right now, they're pretty bad. And if we're worried more about restaurants than we are about that, we're worried about the wrong things.
Neil just shared the content you're referencing in the comment section of my personal Facebook page with the hashtag ContentSlinger. So if you would like to read what Quentin Beckham is highlighting, you could have read it in the Daily Progress as an op-ed or on the Free Enterprise Forum website, courtesy of the king of content himself, Neil Williamson. And the stage, the metaphorical stage Quentin Beckham is referencing is the development area in Albemarle County and how it's restricted to 5% of Albemarle for commercial and residential development. Neil Williamson, to paraphrase him, has asked for that development area to expand to a larger percentage of Albemarle, Quentin.
He has. And also, when you look at the development area and people are saying, well, it's not full up yet. Well, yeah, because only the really crappy lots are left. So, you can only give starving people tree bark so often before they start spitting it out. And this is our real estate development reality. And so as hungry as we are for development, there is still this floor limit where it is no longer feasible, attractive or in any way economically viable to develop. So it does me no good for people to point at 5 acres and say, well, look at this empty 5 acres. Well, yeah, and it's in a flood zone and there's no utilities run to it. And it has, 600 feet of difference between this side of the lot and the next side of the lot, along with a gully, and it's over granite where we can't drill a well. So don't tell me that's 5% of development land that people are just ignoring because they want to be somewhere else. It's not developable. Is that even a word, Neil?
No, I think that is a word. That is a tough word to say, though.
I'm going to need more coffee.
The development potential is
The
not
development
there.
potential is low.
Yeah, it's low.
Or absent. And we've done a lot of work to increase density in the land that did make sense. And I feel like we're in this Mexican standoff of, I don't want more density and I won't give up more land. You got to do one or the other. We've got to do one or the other. Or we have to just relegate ourselves to the fact that Charlottesville and the surrounding areas are going to become increasingly more expensive and push out the people who, unlike our pretend idea of the person that moved because they had a remote work job, the people that really need the low housing prices the most are the ones that can't work remotely. And we're just pushing them farther and farther out, and our local businesses are suffering because of it.
You're on fire, dude. This question's coming in two different ways. And Judah, check out that side panel if you can over there on set for us. So Bill McChesney says, how does upzoning relate to the metaphorical stage that Quentin's talking about? Upzoning and the metaphorical stage. Neil then immediately responded and said, does QB believe Charlottesville's zoning ordinance, basically the upzoning, will positively or negatively impact housing affordability? That's an entire show right there.
That's an entire show, but the simple answer is anytime you have more doors, it helps affordability. We were talking about this a lot during the pandemic. Even if what you have is more $600,000 condos, that's still a $600,000 buyer that's not pumping up the price of a $300,000 neighborhood by outbidding everybody. So until we get to the point where we're having more doors, it's a chicken and the egg conversation. I know it's often sounds like good politics or interesting news to say all the reasons we can't build, or to say what about this or what about that. And the truth is we're talking about problems that we would be grateful to have. And we just can't even get through the first step of making development possible for the developers that are in town and local business again. We're talking about local businesses again that will help promote the economic growth that we all want to have, that will increase housing affordability that we all want to have. And we're doing this round robin of it's UVA's fault, it's this fault. What about this 5 acres? Well, we need a 3-year planning process. And that's all just pushing a better Charlottesville and a better county further down the line from us. We don't have enough land available for development. We don't have enough doors. And we don't have enough doors with access to where the jobs are. And we got to fix that if we want to really talk about equity and inclusiveness just for our own people, just for the folks that are voting for all of you out there that are local officials. Where are they going to live in a year? The person that voted for you in the city this year, how many of them are going to have to move out and not vote for you the next time it comes because they can't afford to pay the taxes and the rent and to stay in town? We have to take care of those folks, and they're not those folks, they're our folks.
Do we think, I'll play devil's advocate with you for the sake of a talk show. And this is something.
I'm going to grab a bottle of water.
Please.
But I'm listening.
Please, absolutely. Kevin, we'll get to your questions here. There's a lot of comments coming in here. We're going to try to get to as many as possible. So, Bill, you've probably noticed this. A lot of you guys have noticed this. The homes or the lots that are in high-density potential upzoning areas are trading, or the asking price for these particular properties is quite high. There was one that we highlighted most recently, and I'll see if I can find it from a previous show. It was dirt, 2 lots next to each other with an asking price of $1.2 million because of the potential of building 26 units of apartments on them. It's just dirt right now. So, devil's advocate sake of a talk show here. Is the upzoning not the foundation for capitalistic speculation and or investing, which is then driving up the cost of comparable real estate around the speculation that's happening?
I think a better question is, are our local developers evil and or dumb? And I know many of them, and they're not. They're neither of those things. So getting 26 houses, doors, on a $1.2 million lot is less money per chunk of land than the single-family homes that you have right now. It's a better return on tax revenue for the city, which maybe could result in lower property tax percentages, because we have pretty expensive property tax by and large. It's not horrible,
big time,
but it's not cheap. We're in the upper echelon there. And the whole time we're having this worrisome conversation, we're not adding doors. And so I just feel like we're being our own worst enemies, because we're finding so many excuses instead of just biting the bullet. Let's try it on one piece of land and see what happens. Why don't we just let it happen and let people move in and let the economics of it rule? The developers will not jump into something that's not going to work.
Okay.
And I would wager you see some small builders that don't survive the next 2 years.
I think that's happening now.
Because any cost we're worried about for individual buyers, for the developers, it's much greater.
No doubt.
And then they have to try and pass that on in a market with very few buyers. And I don't think that's going to be an easy reality for them. And, I really want the developers to succeed, not just because I know many of them and I like them and they're good humans, but also because until they do,
we're not going to have more housing.
We're not going to have more housing.
Yeah.
And our very first question on the show was, how do we get more houses?
The lots I'm mentioning are at 105 and 107 Piedmont Avenue. Mm-hmm. Less than, it's 0.69 acres.
I saw another one that was, it's got a house on it, but it is by rights 6 units instead of a single family, and up to, I want to say 24 with a special use permit, and it's listed for $350. And it's a house you would want to push over.
It's a tear down.
Yeah, it's a tear down house.
Yeah.
It's a very reasonable price for the potential of the lot. And we need to start investing in potential, because we don't have a lot of it left.
We're landlocked and there's not enough dirt left.
Yeah.
How does it impact, though? How would these transactions, if they trade at these price points, impact comps in that respective neighborhood? How would they impact tax assessments and the carrying costs of owning the real estate next to these speculated properties that traded at high dollars?
So this is why I have a crystal ball.
Oh, can we go to the crystal ball camera, Judah?
I have a crystal ball so that you can, I can read exactly what's going to happen.
You're looking very sinister with that crystal ball.
It does. It feels a little like $6 million.
Austin Powers reference.
I don't know how every individual lot we were just talking about will play out in the neighborhood, because there's a lot of factors to that. What we do know from watching cities across the country that increase density is that the overall municipality income through taxes goes up, traffic congestion goes down, infrastructure becomes cheaper, and the individual per capita tax load remains the same or drops. I have no reason to believe that that wouldn't be the same story for us over the long term, but we're never going to know unless we get there. And we're never going to have more doors unless we try. So I feel like a lot of the things that we talk about that stop us is just crap. It's just worrying about things that don't exist yet. Let's worry about traffic after we can house the 45 people that work here in the city, because all the world says, and I grew up in LA where sprawl just created the traffic that is Southern California, the more we spread people out, the worse it is, because they're still all trying to get into their jobs here unless they're working remotely. Hopefully that'll help some. And increased density, like should have happened over by Belvedere, actually doesn't increase traffic. it's making people live farther and drive in individually that does.
Good stuff from Quentin Beckham today.
It also entrenches poverty, but that's a different story and a whole nother show.
That's a completely different show. This question's come in for you. Get Quentin's take on the percentage of townhomes that will be built versus detached in 2023 and 2024 due to many factors besides land costs for developers and builders.
Say that one more time.
The question is this, and Dan is a big townhome proponent. Will we see more townhome new construction because the dirt is getting expensive, cost of goods and labor are expensive to construct houses? Will we see the developers head to a townhome model or townhome-centric model over the next 2 years to create affordability for buyers?
I think we've already had developers that have tried to move into mixed density developments where they've got single-family townhomes and condos, and they've been stopped by the local zoning government, the local government zoning and planning commissions and those folks. So yes, I would like to see that, and I think we should see that. It's definitely what we need to help reduce the overall cost, because so much of it, there's a certain portion that's land. Part of why land trust works is because you're taking that cost out of the equation. The same thing is true of higher density builds, townhomes, duplexes, quadplexes, condos. So that is always helpful. There's a reason why apartments are not one little house on a piece of land and then a half an acre away another one, because they need to reduce the price and have some efficiency of scale. That's true for housing as well. If we can have some density, it could help create opportunity for all the folks that are currently shut out of the housing market. Is it going to be a fix that we can accomplish in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Probably not, because we've had 2 decades of not building enough. But that timer doesn't start until we do. And so the concept that, well, you're going to do this and it's not going to change anything in the next 6 months is a bad argument.
Dude, you're killing this. This is one of the best shows the man has ever done here.
He says this every time I'm here. He just wants me to come back.
I do want him to come
He
back.
has to say nice things.
He makes the job of what I have to do quite easy. I'm just the pace setter that keeps the conversation going, but when he's here, I don't really have to work on doing that. All right, so with the sake of time here, how do you look at this, the rest of this year? How do you look at the rest of 2023? You have a lot of folks that count on you as a CEO and owner.
I look on it with great hope and opportunity. Our industry lived through a phase where even if you weren't very good, you could sell some deals and you could do some real estate.
Certainly during COVID, that was the case.
Certainly during COVID. Because the opportunity to sort out the wheat from the chaff was not there. There was frenzied. It created a lot of fog. That fog is lifting, and we're going to be left with really smart, very service-oriented, very committed to their client, realtors and real estate agents and brokers and brokerages. And I think that opportunity to remind people that everybody I know in the local real estate community really cares about their clients and their community. They're not just in it for a paycheck. They're not overcharging. They're working hard, and they're really trying to get their clients from point A to point B while still worrying about their point C and D and E and F. And I welcome the opportunity for those people to really shine, because there's plenty of business for them.
There you go. My friend, weekend plans?
Oh, gosh. Hopefully car hunting with Lee Elberson.
Okay.
Maybe watching some How It's Made, because now that I'm thinking about it.
I got a trivia question for How It's Made that he posted in the feed. Thank you for bringing that back up to me. Lee, I promised you I would relay the trivia question to him.
Oh, now
and
I'm afraid.
I have it right here. This is, I think, a challenging one. Where's that trivia question, Lee? Let me see if I can find it.
Mainly, I'm looking towards the new year with lots of hope. Things are nowhere near as bad as they could have been. And we are moving forward in ways that are positive, where it doesn't feel like all the burden is being put on people that were already up against a wall anyway. That's something to cheer about.
Well, how about this question as I find that question? And Lee, if you're still watching, put that back in the feed for me if you can. This question's coming from Thomas. What is the more fragile industry, the mortgage business or the real estate business right now? I will add, these are very close to being one and the same here. But I think he's basically asking the question, which career path is more fragile right now? Mortgage loan officer or real estate agent?
I think it's a loaded question and maybe not an exactly fair one. I think that depends on your commitment to it and what your final goals are. You know, there's a lot of ways to argue both sides of that equation, but if you are really committed to your clientele, to being the best, giving professional, focused, knowledgeable service to your clients, and remembering that the job is 80% service, 20% sales, you're gonna be fine. And if you are teachable and coachable, you're gonna be fine faster. If you're none of those things, then I don't know, maybe you should be a sports announcer.
I was a sports announcer at one time.
Oh, I didn't know that. Really?
I was, yeah, out of UVA. That was the first job. Was working in sports broadcasting, TV, radio, and print.
Now I'm really curious about how it's made trivia.
I can't. There's so many comments on the LinkedIn page. I can't find the question.
Gotcha.
I really want to ask you that trivia question, but I can't find it. I will ask you the most challenging question I've asked you so far. Quentin Beckham on a Friday night, Aberdeen Barn or Tavola?
Oh, it depends on the Friday night.
You gonna play this one safe? Because I know you like both restaurants.
It also depends on if I have to start pre 5 p.m. or after. Pre 5 p.m. I end up at Aberdeen.
At the barn. Yeah, because Tavola opens at 5, right?
Tavola opens at 5.
Okay.
Also depends on who I'm meeting.
If you're with Rachel Burns, you're at the barn.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. I haven't seen Rachel Burns in a minute. Rachel, if you're watching the program, props to you and Happy New Year. I enjoy when you come on the talk show.
Thank you. It flew
by, right?
That flew by.
It flew by. He generally makes this quite easy. Keller Williams Alliance is the firm that you can count on and trust. If you're looking for a container to keep your coffee warm, Closure Title and Settlement Company has not only great swag and merch, but they're a great closing and title and settlement company. Judah Wickhauer is our director. Quentin Beckham, don't be a stranger.
I will try not to be.
The last time you were on the show, now you were here for our Christmas party, but we didn't get you on air. When was the last time prior to this? It's been
I don't remember.
A few weeks.
Around Thanksgiving.
Okay.
I thought.
Yeah.
Hasn't been all that long.
We need to uptick Quentin Beckham on the talk show more because this was a piece of cake for me. Judah Wickhauer, thank you for adapting on the fly to everything. Quentin Beckham, thank you kindly for joining us. This is Real Talk with Keith Smith, presented by Keller Williams Alliance. All the shows archived at realtalkwithkeithsmith.com. And the I Love Seville show is up in approximately 59 minutes on a Friday. Take care, everyone. Quentin, bravo.
I feel like my voice is going out. I'm starting to sound